She was only 8 years old, barefoot, starving, and nearly dead when she collapsed outside a stranger's cabin. What he did next could have started a war, or stopped one forever. But when 40 warriors showed up at his door before sunrise, everything changed. Dakota Plains, 1880s. The wind carried a strange sound that morning. It was not the usual whisper of the grass or the cry of distant hawks. It was softer, almost like a whimper. Micah Boone, a quiet blacksmith of 42, paused mid-strike at his anvil. Sweat dripped from his brow, but the sound made him stop. He listened again. There it was, faint, broken, and coming from the line of trees behind his workshop. Micah laid down his hammer and stepped outside. The sun was still low in the sky, casting long shadows over the prairie. He narrowed his eyes toward the woods, scanning the edge where the tall grass met the pines. Then he saw her, a small figure, crumpled near the base of a tree. She was barely moving. A child. His heart dropped into his boots. Without a second thought, he rushed across the dry grass. As he got closer, the figure came into view, a girl no older than 8 or 9. Her skin was dark, her long black hair tangled and full of leaves. She wore torn buckskin, and her bare feet were cut and raw from walking too far. Her eyes opened just a sliver as he knelt beside her. She tried to speak, but her lips were cracked, and her voice was only a whisper of breath. Micah said nothing. He simply scooped her up in his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Inside the workshop, he cleared a space on his cot and laid her down carefully. He wrapped her feet in clean cloth and poured a cup of water from his jug. She drank in small, desperate sips, her hands trembling so badly he had to hold the cup for her. Micah had seen hardship in his life. Famine, fire, the kind of sorrow that settled deep into a man's bones. But this girl's condition still struck something inside him. She had clearly been alone for days, maybe longer. As she rested, he noticed something tied around her neck, a small carved eagle on a leather cord. He recognized it, a symbol often worn by the Lakota people, especially by families tied to leadership. He felt his chest tighten. Could she be someone important? He didn't know. He only knew one thing for certain. She had come to him in need, and he could not turn her away. Micah sat beside her in silence as the wind whistled softly through the cracks in his windows. Outside, the world remained quiet, but deep in his gut, he felt it. This day had changed everything. And somewhere far across the plains, someone would be looking for the girl he had just carried into his home. The girl slept for hours. Micah Boone sat nearby, quietly watching the rise and fall of her chest. Outside, the forge remained cold. The world of hammers and horseshoes could wait. Today, something more important had entered his life, and he did not yet understand what. When she finally stirred, the girl looked around with frightened eyes. She tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale beneath the dust. Micah moved slowly, not wanting to scare her. "Easy," he said in a calm voice. "You are safe here." Of course, she did not understand. She spoke in soft, quick syllables, a language Micah did not know. But he recognized the rhythm. Lakota. He had heard it spoken before, during market days or when scouts passed through the outer hills. She touched her stomach and then her lips. It was a gesture Micah understood. He nodded and stood. From a small pot near the hearth, he poured a bowl of warm broth and tore off a piece of bread. When he handed the food to her, she hesitated for a moment, then began to eat with small, careful bites. Her hands shook as she held the spoon, but she finished every drop. Micah watched quietly. He didn't speak again. He simply let her eat in peace. When she was done, she looked at him, not with fear, but something softer. Curiosity, perhaps. Trust was a long way off. But something had shifted. That was when Micah noticed the small object around her neck. A hand-carved eagle, smooth and polished, hanging from a leather cord. It had been hidden under her torn clothes, but now it lay in plain view. His breath caught. He had seen that design before. Years ago, a trader passing through town had spoken of the Lakota chief, known as Eagle Feather. The man was a legend, proud, fierce, and wise. He had once united several clans under his banner. The trader had said that every member of Eagle Feather's family wore an eagle talisman just like this one, carved by the chief's own hand. Micah looked again at the child, now curling up under a blanket on his cot. Her eyes were closed, but she still clutched the eagle tightly in her hand. It hit him all at once. This was not just any child. She was the daughter of a leader, maybe the only daughter, and now she was in his home, and he had no idea who might be searching for her. Micah felt a cold wind slip in through the cracks in the window. He stood, walked to the door, and looked out across the empty plains. The land was silent, but his heart was not. He knew trouble would come, and it would not come alone. The sun sank behind the hills, casting long shadows over the plains. Inside the workshop, the fire in Micah's hearth burned low, sending soft orange light across the walls. The Lakota girl lay sleeping again, wrapped in an old quilt, her breathing steady now. Micah stood by the window, arms crossed. Something felt wrong. The night was too still. No owls, no crickets. Just the soft howl of the wind through dry grass and the creak of old wood shifting in the cold. He narrowed his eyes and peered into the darkness beyond his fence. Then he saw it, a shadow moving along the edge of his property. Then another. He stepped away from the window slowly and reached for his old rifle. He had not fired it in years. His hands were steady, but his heart beat faster. Before he could do anything, he heard a knock. Micah froze. Another knock followed, firm but not loud. He opened the door carefully, keeping the barrel of the rifle out of sight. It was Emery Tate, his neighbor from a few miles east. Emery looked out of breath, his horse tied to a post and snorting in the dark. "You got a visitor in there?" Emery asked in a low voice. Micah didn't answer right away. "Why?" "Because word's spreading through the valley. Chief Eagle Feather's girl went missing 2 nights ago. Hunters say she wandered off during a storm. Lakota scouts are already riding through the lowlands." Micah's stomach sank. "You sure?" Emery nodded. "Saw their campfires myself on my way here. They're searching hard, and if they find her here, they'll think I took her," Micah said flatly. "Yes," Emery replied. "And even if you explain, it might not matter. She's their blood, their future." The 2 men stood in silence. From inside the cabin came the soft sound of the girl turning in her sleep. Micah lowered his voice. "I didn't go looking for her, Emery. She came to me. She was starving, barely breathing." "I believe you," Emery said. "But belief is not enough, friend. Not for them." Micah felt torn in two. Should he take her to town? But what then? People there feared the Lakota. They might turn her over, or worse. Should he ride toward the Lakota camp and try to return her? Alone? In the dark? With a rifle pointed at his back? Or should he hide her? Lock the doors, blow out the lamps, and pray they pass him by? None of it felt right. "I do not want war," Micah whispered. "Then choose fast," Emery said, "because war may already be riding toward your door." Emery mounted his horse and rode off into the night. Micah stood at the threshold, the rifle in one hand, the wind pulling at his coat. Inside, a child slept. Outside, a people searched, and the night grew darker. The first sound Micah heard was the drumbeat of hooves. Not one, not two, dozens. He leapt from his cot and moved to the window. The sky was still dark, but the horizon had begun to pale with the first breath of dawn. As he looked out, his heart froze. They were here. From every side, warriors on horseback emerged from the shadows. They moved in silence, surrounding the cabin in a perfect circle. Their faces were painted. Their bows were drawn. Spears glinted in the morning light. Micah counted quickly. 2 many to fight. 2 many to reason with. He turned and saw the girl standing barefoot by the hearth, eyes wide with fear. She had heard them too. The pounding hooves. The whisper of death in the wind. Micah took a deep breath and stepped outside. His rifle was still inside. He raised both hands high above his head. A tall man dismounted and walked forward alone. His long black hair was streaked with silver, his chest marked with old scars. His eyes held the weight of generations. He stopped a few feet from Micah. "I am Eagle Feather," the man said, his voice deep and clear. "You have something that belongs to me." Micah nodded slowly. "She is inside. She is safe." The chief's jaw tightened. "Safe? With a white man? My people have buried children who were promised safety. I did not take her," Micah said. "She came to me. She was dying." At that moment, The door behind him creaked open. The girl stepped outside. There was a sharp gasp among the warriors. Every bow twitched. Every hand moved closer to a weapon. But the girl did not run from Micah. She ran toward her father. "Taku!" she cried, a word Micah did not understand. Eagle Feather dropped to his knees and held her as she threw her arms around him. He closed his eyes and touched her face gently, speaking soft words in Lakota. Then he pulled back and looked at her, serious now. She began to speak quickly, pointing back toward Micah, then to her mouth, then miming eating. She showed her injured feet and pointed again to Micah. She was telling a story. Micah could not follow the words, but he saw the faces around him begin to change. A few warriors glanced at each other. One lowered his bow, but not all were convinced. A younger warrior, sharp-eyed, tense, stepped forward, shaking his head. He said something low and angry. The chief raised a hand to silence him, but did not speak right away. Eagle Feather stood slowly, his daughter at his side. He turned to Micah once more. "She says you fed her, gave her warmth, asked for nothing." Micah nodded. "Yes, that is all I did." The chief looked at him for a long moment. His eyes were harder now. "Then you have placed yourself between a father and his fear. That is a dangerous place to stand." The sky lightened behind them, but the air had never felt heavier. The morning sun crept over the hills, casting golden light on the grass and the circle of warriors. The tension had not lifted. If anything, it had deepened. Chief Eagle Feather motioned for a man from the group to step forward, a middle-aged warrior with kind eyes and quiet strength. He was the translator, known as Running Wind. He spoke both Lakota and English well. The chief nodded at his daughter, and she began to speak. Her voice was still soft, but there was power in her words. She looked directly at her father, then at Micah, and then at the circle of warriors watching her every move. Running Wind listened closely, then turned to the others. She says she was lost during the storm. She wandered for days. No food, no water. She thought she would die. Micah stood still. He did not move, did not speak. She says she found this man's cabin. Running Wind continued, and he carried her inside. He gave her food, water, let her sleep in his bed. He did not hurt her. He did not touch her. A low murmur spread through the warriors. Some looked at Micah with surprise. Others looked at the chief. But one man stepped forward, his eyes sharp as flint. Greyhawk. He was younger than Eagle Feather, but already a leader to many. His arms were crossed, and his mouth was a thin line of anger. He spoke quickly in Lakota. Harsh words. Running Wind translated again. He says this is a lie, a trick. He says the white man knew who she was and kept her as a prize. Maybe for trade, maybe for worse. Micah's face remained calm, but his hands were clenched behind his back. She was dying, he said slowly. That is all I saw. A child. I did what any man with a heart would do. Greyhawk stepped closer, pointing a finger. You expect us to believe that? You, alone in the woods, find the daughter of our chief and decide to play savior. His voice grew louder. You could have taken her to town. You could have sent word. But instead, you kept her in your home like she was yours. More murmurs. Micah turned to Eagle Feather. I was going to return her. I thought she needed a rest first. She could not walk. The chief said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the ground. Greyhawk raised his voice again. We have lost too many to trust men like him. If we do not act, we show weakness. The crowd stirred. Some nodded. Running Wind looked uncertain. Many are listening to him now, he said quietly to Micah. Micah took a breath and looked around. 24 faces, maybe more, were filled with doubt, and doubt was more dangerous than any weapon. He realized then, it would not be enough to feed a child. He would have to defend his soul. The ride to the Lakota village was long and silent. Micah sat on his old horse, surrounded by warriors on every side. His hands are not tied, but he knew better than to think he was free. No one spoke to him. Only the girl, riding beside her father, looked back now and then with soft eyes. The land changed as they traveled. Wide plains turned to wooded paths, and the morning sun warmed the air. By the time they reached the village, the sky was high and blue. Dozens of teepees stood in a wide circle. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children watched quietly as the riders entered, and old women paused their work to stare at the man in the middle. Micah swallowed hard. He had never seen the inside of a Lakota village. He never thought he would, and certainly not like this. He was led to a fire at the center of the village. There, 7 elders sat in a semicircle, weathered faces lined by years, eyes sharp with memory and pain. They wore feathered robes, beaded garments, and silent expressions. Chief Eagle Feather stood behind Micah. The girl sat beside her father, her small hands folded in her lap. The translator, Running Wind, stepped forward. "They will hear the truth," he said quietly, "and they will decide." Micah nodded. The council began. First, the chief spoke. He explained how his daughter had gone missing, how the tribe searched for 3 days, how her trail led to Micah's land. Then Micah was asked to speak. He kept it simple. She was alone, hungry. I fed her. I let her rest. I planned to return her when she was strong enough to travel. No one reacted. The elders just listened. Then the girl stood. She walked to the center of the fire circle and began to speak in Lakota. Her voice was clear, steady. She spoke with the calm of someone older than her years. She pointed to her feet. She mimed the storm. She made a small circle with her hands and said the word for cabin. She mimed eating, drinking, sleeping, then pointed to Micah. She spoke for several minutes. The village was silent. When she was done, she bowed her head and returned to her seat. Running Wind turned to Micah. She told them everything. She said you saved her. You gave her food and a blanket. You said no harsh words. You never tried to hurt her. Micah closed his eyes. A weight he did not know he carried lifted slightly. The eldest among the council, a man with snow-white hair and deep lines across his face, finally spoke. His voice was quiet but firm. He asked only one question. Running Wind whispered the translation. He asked the girl if she would trust you again, even now, knowing what she knows. Micah looked to the child. She stood again, and she said without fear, yes. The fire crackled in the center of the council circle, but the warmth did little to ease the cold air that settled over the village. The girl's voice still echoed in the minds of the elders, her trust in Micah as clear as the blue sky above. But not everyone was ready to accept it. Greyhawk stepped forward from the edge of the gathering. His eyes burned with anger. He looked first at the elders, then at Chief Eagle Feather, and finally at Micah. "This is not our way," he said sharply in Lakota. Running Wind stood quickly and translated. He says kindness does not erase danger. That mercy has never brought back what was taken from us. The white-haired elder raised a hand, asking for calm. But Greyhawk did not stop. He pointed at Micah. His voice rose. How do we know his heart? How do we know his story is not shaped for our ears? He is a stranger, a white man, and we have buried too many to forget what strangers can do. Some warriors murmured in agreement. Others looked uncertain. Micah did not speak. He knew this was not his moment. Chief Eagle Feather stepped forward, slow and steady. He helped her, the chief said in a calm voice. She speaks the truth. We all saw it. Greyhawk answered quickly. And what about tradition? What about justice? You taught me that we do not let insult pass without answer. If we do not act, what message do we send? Running Wind's voice trembled slightly as he translated those words. One of the younger elders nodded. Our people will ask why no punishment was given. They will think we are weak. Eagle Feather's jaw tightened. Strength is not always in the fist. Sometimes it is in restraint. Greyhawk stepped even closer, his fist clenched. Then you choose mercy over honor. Now the fire truly grew tense. Whispers passed through the warriors gathered around the edge of the village. Some shifted their feet. Some placed their hands on weapons. Not in threat, but in discomfort. The line between disagreement and division had become thin. Micah looked around and saw it happening. A tribe that had arrived as one was beginning to fracture. Not because of him, but because of the question he now stood in the middle of. What does justice look like when mercy is also true? Greyhawk pointed again. If we do nothing, we open the door for every outsider to come and claim innocence. Chief Eagle Feather raised his voice. And if we punish this man, who showed nothing but kindness, then we become no better than those who punish us for who we are. Silence, heavy and deep. And then the chief said something no one expected. We will not decide now, he said. Tonight, we speak. Tomorrow, we choose. Micah exhaled, but his relief was brief, because by morning, kindness or blood would win, and he had no way to know which. The village fire burned low as the sun slipped behind the hills. Shadows stretched long across the land, and the mood among the warriors grew heavier with each passing hour. Tension crackled in the air like a storm waiting to break. Micah sat near the edge of the fire circle. He had not eaten all day, not from fear, but from knowing the weight of what came next. One word from the council, one angry shout from a warrior like Gray Hawk, and everything could change. Chief Eagle Feather sat silently, eyes fixed on the flames. The elders whispered among themselves. Gray Hawk stood with arms crossed, surrounded by several younger warriors who nodded at his every word. The whole village held its breath. And then, the girl stood. She stepped into the center of the circle, barefoot, small against the night sky. She wore a clean dress now, one given to her by her aunt earlier that day. Her hair was tied back. Her face was calm, but her voice, when it came, was strong. She spoke in Lakota. Micah could not understand the words, but he felt their power. Her hands moved with purpose. Her eyes swept across the crowd. She pointed to herself, then to Micah, then to the fire. Running Wind translated, slowly at first, then with more confidence. She says she was afraid. She thought she would die. No food, no water, and no one to hear her cries. She says when she fell near his cabin, she prayed for her mother to come. But instead, it was a stranger. She says he gave her food. He gave her warmth. He never raised his voice, never touched her in anger. The crowd had gone still. Greyhawk shifted, watching her closely. Running Wind continued. She says, if your child were lost and a stranger helped them, would you punish that stranger for showing kindness? The question hung in the night air. What would you want if it were your child? She asked again. Even without translation, the words were clear. Some warriors looked away. Others lowered their heads. Micah watched, barely breathing. The girl turned to Greyhawk now. She looked him straight in the eyes and said something firm, but without anger. Running Wind's voice trembled. She asks you, do you have children? Greyhawk didn't answer. She says, if your son or daughter lay in the grass, starving, bleeding, would you thank the man who fed them? Or would you raise your weapon because of his skin? A long silence followed. Greyhawk opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked down at his feet. Then slowly, with the eyes of the village upon him, he lowered his spear. The girl said one last sentence. Running Wind translated it quietly. She says, mercy is not weakness. Mercy is what makes us strong. And with that, the child sat down beside her father. And for the first time since Micah had entered this place, no one moved to stop her. The fire burned low now, only glowing embers remaining in the center of the circle. The air had shifted. What once felt like a battlefield now felt like sacred ground. After the girl spoke, no one had said a word for a long time. The elders sat in silence. The chief, too, remained still, eyes closed as if in prayer. Even Gray Hawk, once full of rage, stood quietly with his head bowed. Then the eldest of the council, a man known only as Silent Branch, stood. His back was bent with age, his hair completely white, and his face carved with lines from 100 winters. But when he spoke, his voice was strong. He said only a few words in Lakota. Running Wind translated slowly. He says, the spirits have watched. They have tested us, and they have seen enough. Micah's heart thudded in his chest. He stood but said nothing. His eyes searched the faces around him, waiting. Chief Eagle Feather now rose. He placed a hand gently on his daughter's shoulder, then looked to the council. We have heard truth, he said, and truth must guide us, not fear. He turned to Micah. You will not be punished, he said. You will be welcomed. A murmur of surprise swept through the gathered crowd. You gave shelter to a child who was not your own. You acted not as a warrior, but as a human being. Micah let out a breath he had been holding since sunrise. But then the chief raised one hand. There will be one condition, he continued. Not for our sake, for yours. Micah nodded slowly. Speak it. You must vow this in front of the council, the fire, and the spirits of our ancestors, that from this day forward, any soul who comes to your door in need, no matter their color, tribe, or tongue, will not be turned away. Micah stepped into the center of the circle. I vow it, he said, voice steady. The chief watched him closely. I do not make this vow lightly, Micah added, but I make it with all I am. No child will go hungry if I can help it. No stranger will be refused water at my table. Silent Branch nodded once, then sat down again. The vote did not need to be spoken. The message was clear in every face. Even Gray Hawk stepped forward, touching his chest in a quiet gesture of respect before returning to the shadows. Micah looked to the girl, who now smiled, not as a child in danger, but as someone who had found her place again. For the first time since the drums had echoed across the plains, Micah Boone felt something rise in his chest. Not fear, not sorrow, but peace. And in that circle of former enemies, strangers, and story keepers, he finally understood. Sometimes the greatest justice is choosing not to strike. The summer wind carried the scent of roasted corn and sweetgrass across the open valley. Drums played a slow, steady rhythm. Voices rose in laughter and song. It had been 1 full year since that night, the night when warriors surrounded Micah Boone's cabin, and everything changed. Now, Micah sat cross-legged near the central fire of the Lakota summer gathering, a sacred feast held once a year to honor ancestors and renew peace among the people. He was not hidden in the shadows. He was not watched with suspicion. He was seated beside the chief himself. And on his other side sat the young girl who had once collapsed near his workshop, starving and lost. She was no longer small and silent. Her eyes were bright now, her voice full of life. She wore a soft red dress adorned with new beadwork, eagles and rivers, a symbol of strength and the path home. When she smiled at Micah, it was the kind of smile one gives to family. Around the fire, elders shared stories. Children chased each other through the tall grass. Warriors from other villages came to shake Micah's hand, not with fear or formality, but with respect. Chief Eagle Feather raised his cup and spoke to the circle. This man, he said, pointing to Micah, was once a stranger. Many feared him. Some even hated him. But when my daughter was in need, it was his door she reached. He looked to his daughter, who now held a wooden bowl of stew, and passed it to Micah first. The chief continued. He chose kindness when he could have chosen silence. And for that, he is forever part of our story. The crowd nodded, some clapped softly. Micah said nothing. He simply bowed his head in thanks. Later that night, as the stars bloomed in the sky and the last embers of the fire glowed red, the girl leaned close and spoke, not in Lakota this time, but in careful, clear English. You saved me, she said, but you did more. You listened. Micah's eyes grew misty. You saved me too, he whispered. I just didn't know I needed saving. She reached for his hand and held it tight. And in that moment, no war drums beat. No rifles stood ready. There was only peace, hard-won, deeply felt, and carried forward not by treaties, but by the choices of two souls who found each other through kindness. Have you ever seen judgment change into trust or fear become friendship? Tell us in the comments. And if you believe that kindness still has the power to change lives, even between strangers, then subscribe to our channel for more true stories of courage, healing, and heart.